Hello and welcome to the latest We Are Sunderland briefing with myself, Dom Short and Scott Wilson, in association with our partners, the Fans Museum, Cospex Opticians. Thanks to them for their support and thanks to you for watching and listening. And apologies at the start because we are probably going to chunt on here for 20 minutes, half an hour or so about everything we've chunted on about for the last couple of weeks. Playoff purgatory, Regis Le Bris tinkering with his team. Is momentum important in the playoff? We are
tick.
Yeah, this is the first video we've done since the Bristol City and Blackburn defeats, obviously. So we won't talk in any great depth about Bristol City. Obviously, things have moved on since then, but we'll just have a chat about the general talking points to come from both, really.
Yeah.
You were at the Stadium Light on Monday, Scott.
Yeah.
7 changes. So you know, we won't go over it all again. We completely get why Le Bris is doing it. But as soon as I saw the team on Monday, I kind of felt like a bit too much, maybe. Is that how it turned out? Does it matter?
Yeah, I mean, we were obviously sat in the press room when the team came through, and I think we all kind of looked at each other and thought, well, feels fairly obvious the way this is going to go, and it kind of did. Yeah, I mean, listen, we can rake over it till the cows come on. The top and bottom is the proof of the pudding is going to be in the eating with this, isn't it? Once the playoff semi-finals start, we will see what kind of shape Sunderland are in when they get the team back together. Now, in fairness to Le Bris, after the game at the weekend, he's pretty strongly said, we're going to draw a line under this now. I've given the players the rest. I've done what I felt I needed to do. We've managed the squad. For the next 2 games, we'll get the team back together. We'll pretty much play the first choice team, and then we'll head into the playoffs. And I am very confident that these players can. He actually used the term "flick the switch," and basically, you know, I back myself and I back these players that once the playoffs start, they'll be where they need to be in terms of form, in terms of momentum, in terms of readiness, in terms of everything. Now, I think supporters are torn over this. I think, you know, some fans think he's doing absolutely the right thing. Some fans think it's madness and you need momentum going into the playoffs. I don't know is the simple answer. I mean, you know, you can look through the record books and there's definitely evidence of teams who have suffered from losing momentum going into playoffs. I think Middlesbrough 2 seasons ago up here in the Northeast were an absolute massive example of that. But then Southampton last season, as Le Bris pointed out after the game, lost, I think it was 3 of the last 4, one of them 5-0 in a game where they made 7 changes and yet went on and won the playoffs. So I don't think there's a right answer. You know, I really don't. But Le Bris is going to be judged on this because, you know, it's not like he's just made a little tinker here and there in the last 3 or 4 weeks, has he? He's turned his team upside down. Results have dropped off a cliff. Momentum has definitely disappeared in terms of on-pitch performance. So he's very much put his flag in the sand in this, and he'll stand or fall on it depending on what happens come the playoffs.
Oxford next, then QPR. Do you think those 2 games, you said there that Le Bris has said he's going to go back to his strongest team now. We'll get to that and what it is. But do you think those 2 games will tell us whether it's been a masterstroke or a mistake? Or do you think we're going to have to wait until Sunderland play, with respect, decent teams?
I think we probably are. I mean, what I would say is if Le Bris plays what we would readily identify as something close to his strongest team, and they go to Oxford and get beat 3-0 and a wandering round as if their heads aren't in it, then that's a worry. But again, it's difficult to judge on these next 2 games because ultimately the results don't matter to Sunderland. And for all that Le Bris will be saying, right, this is our chance to draw a line under it, get back on it, blah, blah, all of this. If you're a player, I still think you're going into these games within the back of your mind. This isn't make or break. You know, these aren't the 2 games that are going to define our season, or hopefully the 3 games that are going to define our season. They're coming in the next couple of weeks. So I still think it's going to be hard to make a really, you know, a proper judgment on Sunderland in these next 2 games. That said, you would definitely want a degree of improvement from what we've seen over most of the last 2, 3, 4 weeks. You know, like I say, if Sunderland are playing what you would describe as their first choice team, and they go and lose against Oxford and lose against QPR and are as listless as they've been recently, then I think that would be a worry.
What you would say is, whether you agree with it or not, whether it's the right decision or not, he's not afraid to make a big call, Le Bris, is he? Like in his first season in this division, this is a gamble. There's no getting away from that. Now, whether it works or not, it is going to either be a masterstroke or a mistake, and the season's probably going to be judged on it ultimately, isn't it? But we've said before, it's for what comes across as a kind of quiet, unassuming, really modest bloke. He's ruthless, isn't he? And he's not afraid to make the big and brave calls.
Well, whether you think it's a good plan or a bad plan, it is undeniable that it is a plan, and that's almost, it sounds stupid to say it, but that hasn't always felt like that's the case with previous Sunderland managers at various stages of the season, and also in playoff campaigns, really. Like you say, if nothing else, he's been very decisive in what he wants to try and achieve in these last run of games, and he's quite openly and willingly said, really, to hell with performances and results. I couldn't care less. Well, that's a bold call for any manager to make when fans are travelling the length of the country to watch the games and all of that goes around it. It's a big, bold call, and he's done it. He's kept players fit. We'll get to it in a minute, but Sirkin and Ballard should be back before the end of the season. Mundell sounds slightly more touch and go, but there's definitely still a chance he's there in the playoffs. So, they're going to be going into the playoffs with pretty much a full-strength squad. Admittedly, we've got to get through these last two games yet, and sod's law, all the best laid plans, something will probably happen in one of those. But all things being equal, what he's wanted to try and achieve in these games, he should have got out of them. There's been a price to pay for it. We all know what that is. He's still absolutely adamant that price is worth paying. So we'll see, won't we?
Before this started, had you named Le Bris' strongest Sunderland 11? Well, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
It would have probably been Patterson, Hume, like Meffamo, Nyan, Ballard, depending on who's fit.
Yeah.
Sirkin.
Yeah.
It gets muddled in the midfield, doesn't it? But like Neil, Bellingham, Rig, or Lefay, Mundell, Roberts, Isidor. So the obvious question when you think about rotating the team and giving players a chance is, has anybody come in and staked a claim? Is Le Bris' strongest team now different to what it would be 6 weeks ago? I'd argue Meander.
Yeah, I was just going to say he's the one, isn't he? Yeah. Meander is the one. And that's an interesting call. I still think if a gun's put to his head, Le Bris probably goes for Isidor, because I think that he thinks that's the best for the rest of the team and that sets the team up better. I think it's getting increasingly hard to deny that over the last month, 6 weeks, Meander has been in much better form than Isidor, wherever he's been playing on the pitch. Clearly you were at Bristol City. The goal is absolutely sensational.
And as was the first half display in full, he was absolutely brilliant in that first half. It was as well as I've seen a centre forward play in the Championship this season in that first half,
which is really saying something. And he looked reasonably bright when he came on, even on Monday. Now, admittedly, he kind of started on one flank, ended up on the other flank. Sunderland were a bit all over the place in the closing stages of that game, but still thought he looked pretty decent. Whereas Isidor, again, it's not that all the elements of his game are still there. It's just at the moment he's in that run where he doesn't really look like scoring a goal, and clearly that's a worry going into a two-legged shootout in the playoffs where chances are likely to be at a premium, and if they drop, is he going to take them? Whereas Meander certainly looks more capable of creating something for himself, doesn't he, at the moment? I think you'd definitely say that. So, yeah, I think that's the big selection dilemma, Isidor or Meander. I still think if Mundell is not available
Lefay on the left
for the first game, is he really going to play Tommy Watson in that playoff semi-final first leg? Or for all the talk about Lefay being better as a 10, this, that and the other, yeah, fully get that. We still haven't really seen him as a 10 in a proper game, have we? So we're still taking a little bit of that on trust. I just think back to that run of games when he was playing on the left-hand side and think that if Mundell's not available, I think Lefebvre is the best bet on the left-hand side. And I think the added bonus of that is it means you play Rig, Job and Neil in the roles that they were playing for pretty much the first 2/3 of the season. So I definitely don't rule that out. As I still think that's a definite possibility that happens. And then, yeah, you know, it feels like there's a chance at centre half, a choice at centre half. But in reality, Le Bris was suggesting that Ballard won't be in the squad for the Oxford game. Will probably be in the squad for QPR. Well, he's not going to start a playoff semi-final ahead of 09 or Metham, is he? I mean, clearly, if something happens to one of them, then he will, yeah. And that's why his return is still a massive bonus. But if Metham and 09 are fit, they're going to start, aren't they?
I think that was one of the big disappointments of Bristol City with the early red card, which was scandalous, by the way, wasn't it? We won't go over it now. But
yeah,
it was the chance. It was the chance for Lefebvre to shine in the central role from the off in a game against a team that want to play. You know, they weren't just going to make life difficult for Sunderland and sit with 10 men behind the ball. And there was a couple of early flashes. I mean, there was a Cruyff turn where he dropped his shoulder in his own box and left two Bristol City men standing and then played a raking ball. And you thought, yeah, you know, this is going to be interesting to see what he's like here. Mm-hmm. And then Sunderland go down to 10 men. Dan Neil has to drop in a centre half and Lefebvre and Rig are then chasing shadows, really, and having to play a disciplined defensive game for the rest of the day. And Le Bris admitted afterwards that Lefebvre was frustrated. But I completely agree with you that how if Mundell hasn't been on the bench for Oxford or QPR, then great if you've got him back in the squad. But given the type of player he is, and he's coming back, you know, powerful, dynamic, it's all speed, it's all power, isn't it, and pace. Coming back from a hamstring injury, realistically, is he going to go straight in? So then what you're boiling it down to is, are you going to start Tommy Watson or Chris Rigg? Because Lefebvre will start. And if Lefebvre starts centrally, feels like it's going to be Rigg that misses out because it won't be Bellingham and it won't be Neil. And I don't think he'd play Rigg on the right and leave Roberts. So it's Watson and Rigg. And on the evidence of the last few weeks, and we'll get to Watson in a minute, but on the evidence of the last few weeks, that's an absolute no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the fact that Sunderland are going to be away from home first as well might just play into that a little bit as well. That playing away from home in that first game, Rigg, Job and Neil feels a more solid three than Lefebvre's a 10, kind of being given the license to wander around and do his own thing. Now, clearly,
and Watson on the left, because
Watson on the left,
Watson was sloppy at times in the second half on Friday, and it was one of his.
Yeah, I mean, he was better. He was better, I think, on Monday. But even so, you know, yeah, I think away from home, that option one, if you like, of Rigg, Neil, and Job in there feels a lot more solid. Even if that does mean you sacrifice a little bit by playing Lefebvre on the left, but I'm still not sure how much you're actually sacrificing because, you know, it's not like he looked like a fish out of water playing on the left. For 2 months, we were raving about him, saying he was the best player in the Championship playing on the left-hand side. So, you know, he's more than capable of being a real attacking threat from out there.
Well, the clips from the game at Middlesbrough are still doing the rounds on socials. Yeah. Not when he was playing on the left. Just on Watson, Le Bris spoke about him before and after the game.
He did, yeah.
Monday. Just talk us through that and the kind of reaction.
Yeah, so I mean, there was he was kind of booed off, wasn't he, in the home game before, which was Swansea. I mean, I'm led to understand that he got a bit of grief getting back on the team bus after the game at Bristol City, which is clearly not great. But that's the reality of the situation we're in. So I think there was a sense before the game, once Le Bris decides that Watson is playing, that, you know, a bit of kind of management of the situation was probably called for. So hence, Le Bris made a real point in the video that was put out before the game of kind of calling on fans, look, you know, Watson, give him a chance. He's an important player for us. Get behind him, that kind of stuff. I don't really think there was much one way or the other, to be perfectly honest, on the day itself. When his name was read out before the game, there was a mixture of kind of applause and boos. There wasn't really any reaction to him during the game massively. And then when he came off, again, there was a mixture of applause and boos. I think that's probably where we're at with it. What I would say is, if he was in a game that was make or break, i.e. a playoff semi-final, and he puts a cross way out of, way beyond the back post and it drifts away, or he overhits a pass through, I think you might see a bit more of a negative reaction. And I don't know. Clearly, he's a young lad. His head's going to be in a bit of a spin, you would think. I don't actually think he's playing that well. That's the top and bottom of it. If you strip everything away and just judge his performance levels, I don't think they're better than what I think you'd get from Lefebvre playing on the left if Mundell isn't available. So that, it's as simple as that for me. That strip everything else away, and as a pure footballing argument, I know he suits the system that Le Bris wants to play better. I get that. I just don't think he's playing well enough to justify a starting spot.
Oxford this weekend then. For all we've talked about kind of games not really mattering when you boil it down, well, this does, because Oxford are in what is a mad scrap for survival at the bottom of the Championship now. So Plymouth 24th, 43 points. Preston 18th, 49 points. 6 points separating 18th and the bottom team. Oxford are 19th with 49 points. Currently 3 points above Luton in 22nd, who've won the last 2 games. Should that help Sunderland? It's Oxford's last home game of the season. They're at Swansea on the last day, which probably isn't an awful fixture if you're scrapping for your life. But Oxford have been far better at home than they have away this season. It's going to be somewhat on the line, and Sunderland are going to face a team absolutely desperate to get something from that game, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's a little bit where it's a shame we didn't get to see more of a normal game on Friday, because that was clearly Bristol City's mindset. It was a massive game for them. And it would have been interesting to see how Sunderland had kind of handled that game, and whether they would have been able to match Bristol City for sheer intensity, because I think that's going to be the question mark at the weekend. Man for man, the side you would expect Le Bris to select is going to be more than good enough to go down there and get a result for Sunderland. It's, are they going to be able to get themselves up at the same level of intensity that Oxford are playing? And again, I keep coming back to, they're professionals. Of course, they should be able to do it. It's a big game for Sunderland. They need to get back on track. Yeah, all of that. But the simple reality is, this game does not matter as much to Sunderland as it does to Oxford. That is undeniable. And I just think often that matters at this stage of the season. We see it time and time again in every league. I mean, like you say, look at Luton, look at Plymouth, look at the results they're starting to get against sides who, actually at the weekend, they were getting results against sides whose motivation level should have been every bit as high as theirs. But they've certainly been getting them against teams that haven't been. And that will be my worry for Sunderland at the weekend. I think Sunderland will win on the last day. I think they will beat QPR at home on the last day, and at least have a degree of momentum, as well as the kind of fitness and the rest and all of that heading into the playoffs. I'm not sure they'll win at the weekend.
The one thing you would say, we talk about momentum there. If you look at, obviously Leeds and Burnley are up now. They're fighting for the title. Sheffield United, 3rd, have lost 4 in the last 5. Sunderland, 4th, have lost 3 in a row. Bristol City, 5th, have only won 1 of the last 3, and they're at Leeds next. Coventry have won 1 of the last 3, and I think they're winless away in the last 4. Middlesbrough have won 3 of the last 4. Millwall and Blackburn are the teams in form down there. Often at this stage of the season, you do have a team kind of rampaging into playoffs with real momentum. But it doesn't feel like there is that this year. And when you get to the playoffs, I don't think there's anything for Sunderland to fear. Now, I think the other teams will be saying that as well. But yeah, I don't think there's anything for Sunderland to fear in the playoffs.
No, I completely agree with you. I mean, I think on these vids we were saying a month ago, Coventry are the team to watch. Coventry are the team. They're putting a hell of a run together under Lampard. All of this. Well, that's stalled badly, hasn't it? They're stuttering every bit as badly as Sunderland are at the minute. Coventry. I mean, they're not even guaranteed to get in it yet, are they? But don't look like they can get a result when they absolutely need one. I think we've seen that kind of off and on all through the season for them. bad result for them on Monday, wasn't it? With losing to Sheffield Wednesday, having been ahead. And Bristol City, I mean, yeah, for all that they beat Sunderland, they still made really hard work of it with 10 men, and then go and lose on Monday. So, no, and like you said, that's before we get to Sheffield United, who clearly now have to deal with the massive psychological blow of having missed out on the top two, and can they get their heads back on? So, there's nothing for Sunderland to fear in the play. They will start as deserved favourites, whoever they play in the semi-final. And then in the final, well, even if it is to be Sheffield United at Wembley, I would, give Sunderland every chance of winning a one-off game against Sheffield United at Wembley. So it's there for them. It's definitely there for them. Like you said, the nagging kind of doubt at the back of your mind is, are they going to be going in as the same team that did so well earlier in the season? Well, Le Bris is adamant they will be. So I think you've just got to have confidence in him. You've got to have faith in him. You've got to back him and say, right, okay, if you believe it, then we will too. Because I think if Sunderland play in the playoffs as they've played for the vast majority of this season, they're good enough to win them.
Only time will provide the answer. We've got one more week of finding a new way. Finding a new way to talk about everything we've talked about here in the last 20 odd minutes of the last 3 or 4 weeks. Oxford away this weekend, QPR home the following weekend, and then the season starts again. Then the season starts again. Well, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting. If you haven't already, then just tap subscribe below if you're watching on YouTube, and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on your podcast platforms, then rate, review. Do shout up and get in touch if there's anything you want us to discuss other than the importance of momentum in the championships, because I feel like we are momentum masters now. And thanks again to all partners, as we said at the start, the Fans Museum and to Cost Specs Opticians. We'll be back next week to reflect on the Oxford game and to look ahead to the final game against QPR at the Stadium of Light. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your week.